Alright, so I did a search for Joe Jackson on the internet, and I found some write-ups about him. If you look here though, they have this guy that's identified as Joe Jackson. He's an older black guy, and this is Joe Jackson's buddy. I don't see any other Jacksons at the Ansonia Police Department list here. I went to their website, and I also looked at an award ceremony here for all the names, and I only see one Joseph Jackson. This is Joe Jackson's buddy though. I would say he's maybe like 15 or 20 years older than Joe, and he was that guy in the parked car taking photographs of Rob Mailet, Joe Jackson, and I would say around December 17th of 2013. I don't know if they're going to say this is another Ansonia cop who they got mixed up, but it's kind of interesting to see here that they're mixing up Joe Jackson with Joe Jackson's buddy here. I also looked around and I saw that Joe Jackson was arrested in May of 2008, so I want to talk about that a little bit. Alright, so I want to go in order here. Team Extra Chromosome is upset with what I'm doing here. They've been chanting all morning, "We got more chromosomes than you do," and they're really upset at the rest of us for trying to do the right thing while they get paid for being absolute fuck-ups. So I want to talk about this arrest, and it starts with a lady named Officer Burns, or Sergeant Burns. And Sergeant Burns was a cop in Bridgeport, Connecticut that worked the night shift. And so I guess there was a group of them that were kind of close together. So February 29th, 2008, Sergeant Burns seemed to be dating another cop, and her boyfriend gets drunk on his night off, and he crashes his truck into a parked car. And he's drunk, and I guess he panics, and he drives it into a parking lot where it stalls. And I guess he runs off on foot, and he calls fellow cops to help get him out of trouble. So the cops there decide the only thing they could do is give their buddy a ride home, and they come up with this story that the truck was stolen. So they ended up taking a screwdriver or something and prying the ignition switch off his truck. And then the next morning he calls up and he reports his truck stolen. So it seemed to have worked, and they get away with that. And that was February 29th, 2008. Now approximately 3 months later, on May 26, 2008, Sergeant Burns is working the night shift. It's about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and they pulled over this, I guess, young girl who's stolen her mom's truck. And I don't know all the details, if the mom called and reported the truck stolen or what, but they basically pulled the girl over, and then they called her mom to come down to the scene and to identify if this was her daughter, you know, in the quote-unquote stolen truck. So you can imagine a couple of cop cars with lights on, having pulled this girl over. The mom's there, and the cops are having to deal with all this stuff. And up drives Officer Joe Jackson from the Ansonia Police Department. Once again, they're in Bridgeport, Connecticut, which is a larger city, about 15 minutes away from Ansonia. So Joe has a couple lady friends with him. He's in his white Mercedes Benz. And so Joe cruises up on the scene. He needs a briefing. So he rolls out his windows and says, you know, what the fuck, you know? what's going on over here? And so there's a cop standing there. I guess it's a guy cop, because I read this police report. So there's an officer kind of talking to this lady who's the mother of the girl who stole her car, and they observe Joe Jackson drive up and want to know what's going on. And so the officer says, just move along, you know, get out of here, it's none of your business. And so Joe continues to hassle the cop. When you read on, he's a little drunk, he has a couple of friends with him, and Joe wants a briefing of what's happening. So I guess he finally won't take none of your business, just move along. He won't take that as an answer. So this infuriates, I'm guessing, based on reading this, Sergeant Burns, who says, you want to get involved? Now you're going to get involved. Pull your car over here. So Sergeant Burns pulls Joe over, orders him out of the car, and says, put your hands on the car. I'm now going to frisk you to make sure you don't have any weapons, which is, I guess, normal police protocol. When you're pulling someone over and some guy pulls up in his personal car and starts questioning you and acting kind of, you know, loud and like he's calling the shots, if you're going to pull him over to see what his problem is, the first thing you want to do is frisk him, make sure he doesn't have any weapons. He could just be a crazy guy yelling that he's a cop. So Joe kept on saying, I'm a police officer. And I guess she was pissed off, and she's like, I don't give a fuck if you're a cop, put your hands in the car. And so Joe continued to refuse to do that, and they ended up, you know, swearing at him and then shoving him against the car and arresting him. And I guess this got worse at the station with them arguing, and they said that Joe got belligerent and aggressive and everything at the police station as well. So this was May 26, 2008. So Joe's court date was June 6, 2008, where all charges were dismissed. Meanwhile, approximately a year later in Bridgeport, Sergeant Burns is promoted to lieutenant. And this is based on an article I read called Cops Caught in Crash Cover-Up. And quote, Midnight Gang, protected officer involved in DUI hit and run. Written by Daniel Tepfer at Connecticut Post, Tepfer. So around 2009, Jackson began to file grievances because he was placed under suspension, because in this report here they said that he was reinstated as a full-time cop after he was cleared of those charges in court June 6, 2008, all charges dismissed. They investigate him. The Ansonia Police Department begins an internal affairs investigation that is concluded with the police chief finding Jackson at fault for breaking a couple of rules in their golden rule book of officer conduct, and he's basically suspended for 8 days, and something is on his record there, I'm guessing, because not all the information is in the report. So Jackson begins to file grievances and then appeals that goes all the way through 2009. His grievance was denied by the police chief. Then Jackson appealed to the Board of Police Commissioners, and then that was denied. And then he appeals to the State Board of Mediation and Arbitration. So since the incident, a couple of years have gone by. Back to Officer Burns in Bridgeport. She basically covers up her boyfriend's drunken driving episode and gets away with it. And then she is promoted from sergeant to lieutenant in 2009, so she's doing pretty good. And then I don't have the exact date, but it says in 2010, this incident concerning covering up her boyfriend's car wreck comes back to haunt her. And there's a article written in the Connecticut Post called Midnight Gang, protected officer involved in DUI hit and run, published Thursday, November 18th, 2010. So somewhere around 2010, the past came back to haunt Lieutenant Burns, And I guess she is fired for this whole thing. So first, she covers up her boyfriend's tracks that he gets drunk, crashes his car into a parked car, and drives off. He calls up her and a couple of friends from Bridgeport to help cover up this incident. I guess since she's a lieutenant, she gets fired, and the other officers that were involved with this cover-up get like 2 to 3 month suspensions, I think. But she's the only one fired. And then finally, at the State Board of Mediation and Arbitration, Jackson is found not at fault. And that's noted in his record. And the 8-day suspension is changed to a 4-day suspension. Just imagine you're a cop. You've pulled someone over. And you're trying to conduct an investigation. And some guy pulls up behind you and starts acting belligerent or intoxicated. Most police officers will consider that threatening. They kind of roll up and stand behind them while they're trying to investigate someone who's been pulled over. But I guess that all flies if you're Officer Joe Jackson. You get liquored up, get in your Mercedes with your female friends, and just roll up to a couple cops on duty in another city who are conducting a police investigation, start mouthing off to them about what they're doing and wanting to get a briefing from them. And when they tell you to move along, you'll start to argue with them. And then when they pull you over and tell you to get out and want to check to see if you have any weapons on you, you could refuse to do that. And then after you get arrested, you get all angry about that. Of course, Joe's in the Special People Club. You're going to find out. And I really don't think that this Officer Burns just happened to cover up this drunk driving incident for a fellow officer, get away with it, get promoted, and then all of a sudden it comes back out of the woodwork to haunt her, while Jackson is going through all these appeals and grievances. I just find that a little bit too convenient, because it is mentioned in that write-up, nobody with personal knowledge of the incident was at that hearing but Joe Jackson, who maintained he was totally not at fault for the incident. And his girlfriends, Miss B and Miss J, corroborated Joe's story, but they were not there to testify. And of course, we all know that Officer Lieutenant Burns was not there to testify because she was fired